they try to support these guys. And they telling them, okay, we are working. Make sure our money get to our account offshore. They have, how many years we heard about this sanction? They cannot move a dollar or no. I know the guy from center of Tehran deposit $25,000 Wells Fargo Bank in California through the ATM. Come on, guys. When it comes to this kind of thing, they are master, and we are way behind them. I don't know how they did it, but it's a longer story. Maybe one day on the side I'll tell Gary, and then Gary can put it on one of his blog or whatever, one of his news. Back to you.
Thank you, Alan. Abby, followed by Brian.
Hi, Gary. So I think there's a number of things going on. First of all, if you look at this, in the way Trump deals with crisis or he deals with negotiation, I would take the position that this is a tactic, and he's still really negotiating this deal. He's putting hard strength, a whole different level of pressure by saying he's going to bomb the shit out of them or whatever his comments are. But I think he's still in the art of the deal. I do think that this has turned with it being personalized towards Trump, and I don't think we saw that as much before. I mean, if you look at the videos of the protests, the signage is "Kill Trump, Death to Trump," and it's now focused on hurting him. The information of the intelligence out of Israel, I mean, it's not new that there's now how many assassination attempts have we seen towards the president from Iran, but now you see the populace looking at targeting him. There's a total, I mean, it's shifted now where with him, this may get more personal than it had been before. I just think that we're going to see a lot more, we're going to see more weaponry. We probably will go in harder. You'll see the scramble of Pakistan and Qatar and everyone and Turkey trying to get us back to the table. And in a sense, we may still be at the table, but this is just one of our negotiating tactics, is to come hard at them. That's kind of what I think is going on. But I definitely see this becoming more personalized from the IRGC public towards him than we saw before. And that was it.
Thank you, Abby. Well, they try opponents of any country or any organization. It's an excellent tactic to personalize it and make it about one individual. And we know that Donald Trump's a very controversial figure, and we know that in our society, where we are not just permitted but actually encouraged to publicly criticize our leaders, that he's like a lightning rod, and much the same way as Israel personified as Bibi Netanyahu, not as Israel, by Israel's detractors. And so it's a tremendous tactic. It's obviously going way beyond political rhetoric when you're trying to assassinate the President of the United States. That's for certain. I would agree that, as I said earlier, a lot of this is tactical. He's wielding both the carrot and the stick. The question is whether these folks in power in Tehran or wherever they're hiding out these days give a damn about that. And there's no political war of attrition there. There's a political war of attrition in the West. So I guess we'll see which way it goes. Thank you, Abby. We'll go to Brian, followed by Anson.
Hey, Gary. Iran and the United States was never on the same page. Trump would put out a statement, they would put out an opposite statement, or no, that's not the way it was. Even I know somebody had yesterday a signed MOU, but from everybody, so you would think that they would stick to the agreement. We did the honorable thing and took the blockade away. We took off the sanctions. We upheld our end of that agreement that we were willing to go to. They never opened that strait. They never, there were some few ships that went through, but they never really allowed that strait to be open. So we kind of stepped in this in the very beginning, and you know, Trump gave it a try, but time for the MOU and the peace talk is over. So we really don't have any choice but to go to war either until we see a regime change, or at least until that regime agrees that they're going to stick to an actual memo of understanding and stick to the rules. I think they were playing games and stalling as long as they could for whatever reason. Maybe they were rebuilding or getting their stuff into place or whatever. But I think they were stalling and playing games and never intended to do peace. And it shows. Why would they? Why did they bomb that cargo ship? Why would they say that the ships couldn't go through Oman if they were wanting peace? I think, the United States did their part. I mean, Trump immediately took the blockade away. I mean, and I personally think he should have waited on that, but, it's his call. But at least he did do our end of the bargain. They never held up their end of the bargain. As far as I can see, they never really agreed fully to that memo of understanding, and we're not really going to have a choice. And maybe, hopefully Trump can get, at least a majority of the people behind him, and knowing that, look, we tried and it didn't work, so we're going to have to try something different. And that's where I am with it. Thanks.
So, Brian, as I mentioned yesterday, history shows this should be no surprise to anyone. Iran and its proxies, and we use the term proxies, but let's just be clear that these terrorist groups that have been attacking Israel, including on October the 7th, are doing so at the direction of Iran. The command and control is from Iran. The financing of it is from Iran. And you can see every time some kind of a peace or a settlement or a negotiation, or however you want to call it, is struck between Israel and these terrorist groups, the terrorist groups do not adhere to what they agreed to adhere to. And so it should come as no surprise to anyone that Iran didn't live up to the terms of the Memorandum of Understanding. They couldn't even hold themselves back for the short period of time that was prescribed in the MOU in order to negotiate a real end of the hostilities. They couldn't even wait that short period of time. They just don't have it in them. They are not the same as the West. Their perspective is completely different. You know the story about the scorpion and the turtle or the tortoise, where take me across the river on your back, but we're mortal enemies. You'll sting me, but if I sting you, we'll both drown. So there's no way. And then he stings him. He says, "Why did you do that? Now we'll both drown." He says, "I don't know. It's just in my nature." That's
Right.
what we're dealing with here, Brian.
Well, one other quick thing I was going to say, too. I read a story this morning that there was also some strikes on Iran that were not claimed by the United States, and I was wondering if you knew what other Gulf
I
states
do not know who was responsible for that. And as I was told yesterday, if a source told me who was responsible for that, I'm just saying what somebody told me. I don't know what I'm talking about. So maybe I should just keep my mouth shut when I get information.
But
I'm being
wondering-
facetious. I'm being facetious.
I'm just wondering though, why don't they, if they're willing to shoot it while we're shooting and kind of be, like, oh, we didn't do that. Why do you think any of those Gulf states over there are willing to side with us if this goes to war?
They have their
and
own
that
domestic
regime?
issues. They have people, each one of them, who want to overthrow their regimes. They have to be extremely cautious about how they do this. When some of these Gulf states showed support, no, they didn't fly jets or fire missiles, but they showed strategic military support for the United States and Israel last year. This was not something that was made public because of their internal problems. They have to negotiate these waters as carefully as the ships negotiate the Strait of Hormuz to avoid the minefields. It's not dissimilar at all. So I don't particularly see a pan-Arab rising against Iran. Would I like to see that? Absolutely. I think I don't know how any nation sits back and takes incoming from a neighboring nation without responding. I know Israel gets criticized for doing so, but can you imagine if the United States took incoming from another nation, that we would just sit back and say, all we are saying is give peace a chance. That's not the time to sing that song, which I actually love. This is a time when you use your military might and you call on your friends to help you. You can't allow for this kind of bullshit. So I'm with you, Brian. I wish they would, but I don't see it in the foreseeable future. And by the way, as you all know, I accept the fact that I can be wrong. And in this case, I hope I am. Anson, followed by, my eyes are bothering me here, and the name is Estefan. Anson.
The biggest constraint against Iran was what they would look and see a united America intent on continuing military action and strong, brutal economic action until the nature of the regime radically changes, which would mean a regime change. That would be, I mean, why is Iran doing what it's doing? Is it, they see the midterm elections coming up, and every time they turn on their TVs in Iran, if they could, and watch the American news, they would see that if the Democratic Party reflects the expressed will by polls of the American people, 55, maybe 60%, that all military operations whatsoever, any and all, against Iran would stop immediately. And they see the Gulf denuded of the American Navy as soon as the Democratic Party gains political power in the United States. They know Trump is detested by probably over half of the American people. And they see that he is going to become a lame duck president for the next 2 years, 2.5 years. He can blather all he wants, and they can just ignore him and wait for the right political upheaval in the United States, such that if you flew a satellite over the over the Iran and the Persian Gulf, you would not see any aircraft carriers. You would not see any American warships. You would see the bases denuded all around the Middle East. An isolationist America withdrawing to its own borders, and all for the sake of ensuring that we keep gas prices cheap. They don't think the West, in particular the United States, has the intestinal fortitude to stand firm until the Iranian government chooses to join the peaceful nations of the West. And that would be the biggest constraint that if, God forbid, if pick whoever you choose to be a true leader of the Democratic Party in the United States would stand tall and say, we will develop the specific the specific requirements to achieve a ceasefire and a negotiated peace with Iran. And it would be well debated and supported by 80% of the people when it was finally debated and put in place. And then the willingness of the American people to do whatever it takes in order to achieve those goals. We didn't do that. We haven't done that. That's the starting this war without that in place was one of the dumbest acts that America has done, at least since 9/11. And until they see a united states, a united America willing to put on the military pressure, and I don't mean boots on the ground, but reestablishing an ironclad naval blockade. No Iranian ship moves in or out of the Gulf, period. Any Iranian ship inside the Persian Gulf will be sunk. How about that? Anything Iranian that has a dollar sign attached to it will be immediately confiscated by the united financial control of the West. That's what it's going to take in order to make Iran join the nations of peace. The West does not have the gumption to be able to hold them accountable and keep up the appropriate economic and military pressure until they do so. Thank you.
And Anson, I'd like to add to that, and I'd like you to try this out for size, and that is, why is there this big political drumbeat against the United States engagement in areas where you and I may feel that the United States, that it is, that there are existential threats to the United States from these regions, but we're being told over and over and over again.
Go to JohnKitoverNews.com.
It has nothing to do with us, and it's
we are
no
listening
secret.
To a live broadcast podcast about Donald Trump and the Iran war. Like this video, subscribe, and share.
China are funding the political conflict in the United States, that they use a highly sophisticated method. They don't bribe officials like in the old Soviet Union days and the old Red China days, but we know that there's this state-sponsored information warfare, there's digital manipulation, there are organizations that are funded, if you follow the money, there are organizations that are funded, that are out there screaming and hollering about the policy of the United States, and as American citizens, they surely have the right to do so, but they are, let's not lose sight of the fact that they are funded by Russia and China, and when we know that they are funded by Russia and China, then we can assess perhaps their motivation, or maybe not the motivations of the individuals, but we can assess Russia and China's motivation for infiltrating or funding or establishing such organizations here in the United States. So what we see may not be organic in nature in terms of the populist view towards these situations.
I think that the Great Divide, which you're talking about, I believe the Great Divide is 99% a great divide of the American people, American citizens, red-blooded Americans, if you will. Some of it, sure, on the fringes is going to be developed by people that want to that want to weaken the United States and make it lose its superpower status, et cetera, which that's the motivation of Russia and China, and that's the motivation of Iran, death to America. They say it out loud all the time. But I believe the divide is true and real within the United States, and it's so destructive that we are unable to do the things that America used to do, to stand up firmly and resist using overwhelming military power to achieve the reasonable goals of the American government, that was debated and approved in Congress.
Like this video, subscribe,
the will of the people, that Congress would stand up and unite the country through Congress rather than a lame duck, orange-haired man that increasingly is losing the respect of the vast majority of the American people. And until we can do that as a nation, in other words, until that great divide goes away, Gary, our opponents are going to do everything that they can to continue to perpetuate it and make it even deeper and wider.
Well, as you know, I am fond of quoting somebody that you are old enough to remember as well, but most people here probably are not. The cartoon strip character, when we used to have cartoon strips in newspapers, when we used to have newspapers, Pogo was fond of saying, I have met the enemy and he is us. And that's exactly what you're saying.
Exactly. It is not you being influenced by Russia and China that I just, it's not Russia or China making Scott, for example. Scott and I have a hard time agreeing on many things. I don't think it's Russia or China influencing Scott, and I don't think he believes that some right-wing nuts somewhere around the world are influencing me. We're going to have our great divide. Now, I'm not trying to pick on Scott, but Scott and I we don't even have a great divide. There's just a difference of opinion that Scott and I have, where most of the time Marshall and I would tend to agree with each other. But that's the natural ebb and flow of politics in the United States without any foreign or other untoward influence.
Thank you, Anson. We'll go now
We're listening to a live broadcast of the news regarding the Iran war with Donald Trump. Go to ChicagoNewsIncorporated.com.
I'm talking to you from Tehran. I'm so happy there are people like you, and especially Alan, who understand we people who took hostage by this Islamic fundamentalist government who killed us months ago, and during this war they had some people in the street with gun. They threatened us to avoid from a revolution. They are afraid from a revolution to take place. They spend our resources for terrorist groups. We so pleased Mr. Trump, who killed Khamenei, and he did his best, and we become so happy if there would be a boots on the ground and regime change. But I know Mr. Trump is responsible for his country's benefits, and it cost so much for him and his country. But these efforts they do for their own benefits maybe has some benefits for the people of Iran, and I don't know what would happen after this, but remaining of these terrorist groups in Iran would cause lack of sources, lack of water, lack of everything in my country. They waste everything for terrorist groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Estefan. And it's rare that we get to hear from somebody in Iran. And I know you're literally putting your life at risk by doing this. So we appreciate your contribution. And if you feel comfortable and safe, please join us again in the future. William, followed by Daryl.
So Iran is not like us. You started by making asking a good question. You know, how do they see the world? How are they seeing the world? And you again reiterated talking to somebody else. They are not the same as the West, and that's really important to understand. They have allies, and the allies that they have are not the same as one another either. Russia and Iran, China and North Korea. They are allies of sorts, but they're not the same as what we think of as Western allies, because they're not like us. They have peculiarities. What do they have in common? They're all basically authoritarian regimes. But culturally, they've got a lot that's different from each other, and you know, only Iran is really a theocratic regime, at least formally, and acknowledging themselves as being a theocratic regime. You know, you can argue that all of them are, but they're not really the same. So we started this war. We went into the war without consulting with our own allies, and our structure of alliances was the greatest strength that the United States had for 75, 80 years until recently. And so in the first part of the Trump administration, there was a general destruction of the alliance structure. There was a washing out based on this Donroe doctrine. We're going to withdraw, we're going to become isolationists, we're going to withdraw to the boundaries of the United States, and we're going to tariff everybody so that they should all follow us, so that not only did we alienate the allies on some ideological grounds, but we actually economically attacked them. We threatened to attack Greenland. We threatened to, we basically discounted the sovereignty of Canada, our neighbor, of Mexico. We basically treated people that would be natural allies like enemies. So we went into this war without an alliance, without going to Congress, without a strategic plan, without an endpoint, without an exit strategy, and without, fundamentally, as Anson said, that Trump should have gone to Congress. The Republicans are in power. They have the House, the Senate, 2/3 of the Supreme Court, and state governments pretty evenly split across the country.
We don't have the Senate. The thing that nobody in your shoes ever says is that it takes 7 Democratic votes to pass any legislation. You have to have 7 filibuster, and I'm doing is I'm destroying the filibuster anytime.
Okay, I can't hear you because you're breaking up, but what I'm saying is that regardless of those fine points of democratic governance, we went in without doing the basics of having a strategy, a plan, an exit strategy, an endpoint, and even consulting, getting some sort of authorization for use of military force, which would have entailed going in front of the American people and garnering support of the representatives and the American people. We failed to do that. So we went to war. We went to war with basically a Secretary of Defense who titled himself as Secretary of War, who's basically picked because he looked good on Fox TV and was a good theatrical player.
Okay, but what does this have to do specifically with the
Because
question?
we went in and lost. And when we went in and lost, we don't acknowledge it. And now we're scrambling around for what do we do now? And they are not the same as the West.
Let's suss this out just a little bit. You say Trump went in and lost. Did he not secure a memorandum of understanding leading to a ceasefire?
That was not a victory. That was, and we can argue this later, but I believe that was basically articles of surrender.
Well,
articles of surrender.
I'm not talking
That
about
was a memorandum of understanding, which is
historical
different.
definition of it. I'm
No,
talking
there
about
is
the
a
fact
there is
that
a
for practical
distinct
purposes,
there is a
we
distinct
lost.
difference.
We
No,
lost.
there is a distinct there is a
Versailles of all
distinct
places
difference.
to sign it.
okay, so there's
Oh
a
my
difference.
gosh, there is a distinct difference. There's a distinct difference between signing something that is a losing thing and signing a memorandum of understanding. Simply because you don't like Trump doesn't mean you have to portray every little thing as a loss, William.
Well, I agree with Gary that we need to see the world through their eyes. And I don't think we saw the world through their eyes.
Okay, so I want to go back to the question that I was trying to ask you there, William, and that is, so you see it as a surrender, but did not the memorandum of understanding agreement was that they would open up the Strait of Hormuz?
I think the memorandum, and I think it was, they never opened up the Strait of Hormuz.
I didn't ask that. The question I have specifically is, wasn't there an agreement on the part of Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz? Maybe about it. There are 14 points and they're pretty unambiguous. If you read the memorandum of understanding, they agreed to open up the Strait of Hormuz. They agreed to not impede the flow of, the transit of commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. I'm not arguing whether they affected the agreement. I'm saying the agreement was reached. So if you take it on its face value, setting aside your agreement that we need to do a better job of understanding their mindset, and I think we're both in agreement, it was almost predictable that things would work the way they are working right now. Wouldn't that have been something that the president achieved? He was able to, because that's his main goal right now because of the domestic pressures, I believe, with regard to the price of gasoline at the pump. So wouldn't that be considered a victory if in fact the Iranians had upheld their end of the deal?
Well, I agree with you that they're not like us, and they were never going to uphold their end of the deal, and that they don't think like us.
Right, but I said setting that aside, isn't that a victory?
I don't think it was a victory because I don't think that. I think that we achieved a false victory.
You're an attorney. I presume you've negotiated contracts, real estate contracts, employment contracts, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so then when you negotiate a contract on behalf of your client, you give something up and you gain something in return, and sometimes it's not an actual quid pro quo. Sometimes one party benefits better than the other party, but is that a surrender?
So I've had negotiated contracts, and people will enter into contracts, and I've also been in cases where people breach contracts, as is basically the thesis that you have now, and I agree they breached the contract, but I believe the underlying problem is that we never really had an agreement, and that the victory claimed was a false victory because
we did have an agreement. They signed the agreement.
But yes, and they're dirty contract breakers, and they didn't keep their word. And
that means they're fault.
There wasn't an agreement.
But people breach. Trump breaches agreements all the time.
But that's
okay, we're not talking about Trump.
Yeah, we were not talking about Trump before because you said. I just want to say that
they breached the agreement.
When you see the world through their eyes, they're not the only ones who come to the table who are dishonest or disingenuous.
And that hasn't happened in any of the contracts.
But did we ever actually have a meeting of the minds contract that would be enforceable?
Wait a minute.
Is there an enforcement mechanism?
Have you never had a meeting of them?
They didn't have a meeting of the minds. The whole memorandum of understanding was BS. I don't believe it was a genuine agreement that they agreed to. I think they breached it.
So by your reasoning, any divorce decree is BS because a divorce decree only is as good as the willingness of the parties to abide by it.
Well, no, a divorce decree is between the people who are married, so that's a little bit different. But
there are conditions.
It's sort of like having a contract.
There are conditions of divorce decrees, and you and I both know, and you don't have to be an attorney to know this. Because
you can have a divorce and just stick to the real estate. Do people break real estate contracts? Sure, people break real estate contracts. Okay,
there was no agreement. There was no agreement there.
I think the memorandum of understanding
to use your analogy, if I renege on my agreement to pay my mortgage payment,
then you got to go to court.
Right, and in this case, the court was the president dropping bombs on 90 sites 2 nights in a row. That doesn't mean that there was a surrender.
All right, let's forget about surrender. But was there an agreement? Because apparently
there was an agreement. We signed it.
All right. So they're dirty contract breakers. Now the agreement's broken.
An agreement?
What
Was it a meeting of the minds? Was there an offer? Was there an acceptance? Was there? Go through it. Yes, there was an agreement.
Yeah. Okay. You're right, Abby. There's an agreement. But one side was insincere about the agreement.
Well, okay, we know that.
And they didn't.
You're saying there was. Wait, whoa.
And now we all agree that they broke the agreement.
There was an anticipatory repudiation, William?
We all agree that they've broken the agreement.
William, hold on. Abby asked your question.
William, are you saying there was an anticipatory repudiation in this agreement?
No, I'm saying that the agreement at its inception was just a dodge to cut.
William, is that you? Because I didn't mute you.
I didn't.
Trump was not sincere about achieving victory in the first place in the way he said this. And let me finish the sentence.
No. That is not the point. That is not the point, William. Was there an anticipatory renege on the agreement or not? Because you're blaming Trump for something that the Iranians did themselves. And I don't understand why. It's not that difficult to figure out.
Why.
I don't have to be a lawyer to figure out they broke the damn agreement.
Because they don't think enough about us and the agreement.
So that we shouldn't run into an agreement.
It wasn't
we did, so it's there.
You can work reasonably, you can work backwards. Did they have an agreement? It was an agreement that they were willing to breach.
Dude, your hatred of Trump is clouding you from being honest. You are not being honest.
You're being dishonest.
Yes, they have an agreement. They have an agreement that both sides were not going to follow.
Okay, we're going to move on because you're obfuscating the issue that we're discussing. But I just want to point out. Let me give you a real life example of a person who took a position at a relatively small company,
legal documents,
and he was
testimony.
It was pledged to him in writing by the president of the company, who hired him, the president of the company, that upon severance he would receive certain stock options to the company. And the severance ultimately came. But by that time, this guy wasn't president. A new guy was president. So he says, I want to claim my stock options. This guy said, I don't know anything about this. Well, the contract predates your arrival here. You're going to have to talk to the CEO. It's a small company, so he was able to walk into the CEO's office. He walks into the CEO's office, and he says to the CEO, I have it right here in writing that I would get stock options upon severance. The CEO says, well, that was, I'll call him by his first name only, that was negotiated by Joel, and Joel hasn't been here for a number of years. But it's a binding contract. And he said, sue me. Well, the cost of suing him was more than the amount of money he potentially would gain from the stock options, so he left with his tail between his legs. It happens. It doesn't mean there wasn't an agreement, but there was no desire or anticipation by this company to live up to the agreements. No matter what the law says, no matter what recourse the law says that you have, at least in this case, there is some compensation. It may not be a compensation that we want to stomach or that we support, but you saw it. There was, unlike my friend who never got his compensation, the United States got some compensation because they bombed the hell out of some military assets in Iran. And by the way, there is some reporting today that the Iranians recognize that they fucked up when they attacked those ships. They would never say it publicly, but you can read the reporting, and you can agree that it's reporting is accurate, or you may agree that it's inaccurate, because I guess reporters, I was told yesterday, shouldn't be believed if they don't reveal their sources, and that's fine, by the way. It's up to you on whether you accept the veracity or not, right, Daryl? Daryl followed by David.
Yeah, so off top, I would like to briefly, if I can, some latitude, I would like to kind of defend William. I've actually signed 7 MOUs in my career, and what I've come to learn is that generally MOUs are not necessarily legally binding, right? The MOU is, you know, me and you, Gary, we're going to come to an understanding, and if you do this and I do that and you do this, we will at some point enter into a longer form agreement that has like more teeth to it.
Yeah, but wait a minute. Wait a minute a second, Daryl.
Yeah.
What what agreement between two nations is really legally binding? Huh? How many?
Well, treaties are usually legally binding.
How many countries are our country as well been accused of violating international law? Okay, who's going to enforce that international law? Who enforces it? It's only based on whether the parties involved are willing to live up to the obligations that they announced at the time that they signed the memo of understanding.
Well, yeah, it's good faith, right?
It's good faith. That's all it is.
Daryl, MOUs can be binding. There's certain elements that can make an MOU legally enforceable.
Yeah,
And,
but that's
you
why I
know,
said, Abby, I said
and there are
generally.
certain clauses in
Generally,
it.
not
Yeah,
legally
no,
binding.
but
Yes.
there are certain clauses in MOUs that are absolutely binding. You know, where you have confidentiality clauses and such, they are binding. And if you have the clear intention of the parties, and it essentially covers contractual elements, you can have it legally enforceable. So I just want to tell you, it's not a truthful statement to say that they are not enforceable.
See, but that's not what I said. I said they are generally, I use very specific words. I said they are generally not legally binding. I didn't say they are never legally binding. I didn't say in all
They can
cases.
be legally enforceable.
Okay, well,
And
generally.
it varies
is
from
the
state
kind of like,
to state as well.
generally is like the operative word that I'm going with, right? I'm only talking about what William was saying. And
Is something, is a figure that I write down on at a napkin in a restaurant?
I don't know why we're arguing about this. I really don't. I
Well,
don't
you brought it
understand
up.
this. Well, yeah, because what William was saying was technically not wrong, not fundamentally, but technically what William was saying was not necessarily wrong. That was the only point I was trying to make. What part of the part of this whole MOU thing was particularly with Iran was that it was supposed to be, at least this is how it was presented to the American people, right?
To the
We
world.
have
To the world.
Yes, we have a framework for a memorandum of understanding, right? And there were 14 points, I believe.
No. That's technically inaccurate. It was not a framework for a memorandum of understanding. It was a memorandum of understanding, which was a framework for a ceasefire. There's a difference.
Yes, and part of that was, I believe maybe it was the 13th or the 14th, I don't remember which point it was, but wasn't part of the framework that there would be a cessation of all attacks or whatever, and
yes,
yeah, so I'm only saying technique. I didn't even come up to talk about any of this. I came up to talk about what Anson was saying. I was just saying, from a technical perspective, what William was saying was not necessarily inaccurate. What I actually came up to say, because I thought Anson was so on point, right? Like we haven't.